welcome to Digital Discussions presented by Peaky Digital. Today we have Jonathan Davies, Director at LinedUp, joining us on the podcast today. Jonathan, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And you'll be talking to us today a little bit more about consumer journey and why it is so important to the purchase process. Now, before we get to that, we've got the important questions, obviously. So, first and foremost, tell us a bit more about yourself, where you've come from and what your role is within LinedUp.
So, I've been thinking about where I come from, the point in time to take, and I think probably university. Did a degree in psychology back in Edinburgh.
Interesting.
A long time ago, back in the 90s.
With the psychology part, I would imagine is hugely important to everything that you do then.
Yeah, it was quite sort of cutting edge at the time because we one of the only universities of human computer interaction at the time. Oh. So it was kind of early Windows 95 days, and it was a little bit like just getting something on the screen was a big step. But yeah, did a degree up there, followed by way too many ski seasons snowboarding, which I loved. But then at one point thought I need to sort of rejig the career. So came back and did a second degree in multimedia studies at the time, up in Edinburgh again. Went on to get married, have kids, and we decided we wanted to go and live by the sea, so we moved down to Cornwall. I'm giving you the long story here.
It's all relevant.
And then from basically about 2004 onwards, lived in Cornwall. And the spirit of entrepreneurship in Cornwall is such that after a few years of working for an agency down here, I decided to start my own business and formed LinedUp in 2007.
It's interesting, isn't it, just how many agencies there are in and around Cornwall, especially that have set up in the last 10 years or so, really. I mean, was it something about Cornwall that made you think, yeah, this is the perfect place to do this? Or is it just, I live here, there's literally no reason why I can't set up my business here?
It's a very good point. I think the peninsular effect of Cornwall drives a bit of entrepreneurship because, you have to pull on your own resources to get stuff to happen. So I think there's a lot of that. I think combination with the super fast broadband, the ability to work anywhere really helped. And just looking around and seeing other businesses that were doing it very well, I thought it was a good opportunity here. So we started off as a sort of agency that did websites for absolutely everybody. And then in about 2017, so about 5-6 years ago, we took the decision to focus exclusively on e-commerce and Shopify, which we've been doing ever since. We became an accredited Shopify expert in 2017 and haven't really looked back from there.
Well, I mean, Shopify isn't going anywhere anytime soon. It's a very, very popular one. A lot of the clients that we work with are on Shopify. It's always interesting to talk to you whenever we do have a chance, just because your expertise in Shopify, it works well with what we do. I think from our point of view, a lot of the development side of Shopify is very much black magic, and I've heard the same referred to SEO. So it's always great to have you here and to have these conversations. Now that that's out of the way, what's your favourite film?
Favourite film? I've got two really. I've got the classic that I'm again showing my age probably is a Vietnam film.
Go on.
Apocalypse Now.
Very good.
Absolutely love it because every little scene is a mini film in itself.
Yeah.
It's just classic moments in there. So I do like that. It is it's an epic.
Yeah.
And it's very rare that I sit through and watch the whole thing in one go, but I love it. But the film I enjoyed last year, absolutely, and I realised we were enjoying it so much, we looked across, the whole family went, was Top Gun 2. What a film. I was looking at it with the kids in the cinema, and we were just grinning from the start to finish. Have you seen it?
I've not seen Top Gun 2, but I have seen Apocalypse Now, so I don't know what that says about my
they're
age.
very different ends of the spectrum with a similar vibe. But Top Gun 2 will make you smile from start to finish.
I've got no excuse now because it's on Netflix, yeah. So you can't really escape it, and I've heard nothing but great reviews about it. Definitely one to add to the list.
Absolutely, but Apocalypse Now, you can't beat it.
There was also, and again, this is purely for the interest of the podcast, not my own. There's a documentary about the making of it as well. I can't remember
Heart of Darkness.
Heart of Darkness, that's right. Which I've heard people say is even better than the film itself.
Yeah, it was a lot of crazy stuff went on.
Yeah, working with Orson Welles in itself was always, you can't guarantee what next day is going to look like compared to the previous one. And can you tell us a bit more about your favourite takeaway food?
I'm a bit boring on this front, I have to be honest. It's everyone's favourite, the pizza.
I mean, it's a favourite for a reason. You cannot go wrong with pizza.
It is the perfect dish. And we even had pizza last night at home, but that's because my wife's been away for a week and things are getting a little bit desperate on my cooking skills.
You
But
did well to survive a week before going to pizza then, really.
that's true. But the other thing, as I said, I'm a passionate snowboarder and going the mountains. I often think, much to the French disgust, because they look down a lot of our food, let's be honest, the Cornish pasty on a chairlift in the Alps is the perfect dish. Because you've done a run, you're hungry, you can put it in your pocket, keep you warm, eat it on the lift, there's no rubbish, job done. We have frequent discussions as a family about bringing it to the Alps.
I always maintained that because historically British cuisine has not been favourably viewed anywhere outside of Britain, I think a lot of that has changed in the last few years, partly because we've stolen cooking from a lot of other countries, admittedly. But the Cornish pasty and the sausage roll, I do maintain, if the rest of the world just gave us the benefit of the doubt, could take the world by storm.
It is the equivalent of the banana fruit, which comes perfectly packaged. You know what I mean? You have it, you can put it in your pocket, take it away, and eat it. The sausage roll and the pasty are the same sort of vibe. Curry, not so.
Well, no, yeah, definitely harder to conceal one of them in a hoodie or a jumper or something.
And that's got a lot of benefits.
Excellent stuff. So, Jonathan, the reason we really have you here today is to talk more about customer journey and the importance when making a process when people get onto a website. For those watching at home or listening at home, how would you define a customer journey? I mean, if you were talking to someone in the street who doesn't understand any of it, how would you explain it?
So I think customer journey comes from a sort of marketing background of understanding that when a customer makes a purchase or an interaction with any sort of brand or object online, it has a series of stages they go through to get them from A to B to C. And the first stage is really about discovery, about awareness, learning about a particular product, a particular brand, a particular news story or something that you haven't really been aware of previously. So you come in at that point. Then you'll do a little bit of a sort of analysis, a bit of review, sort of understand it. Is this the right thing for me? Is this the right brand? You gain a bit more, you just gain more depth to it, and you're at different stages of the journey. If it's an e-commerce situation, you'll hopefully end up with some sort of transaction at the end. You go, this is the right pair of trainers for me. I've done my research, I've looked at it. So you're at the sort of third or fourth stage of the journey. And then the ideal is you become an advocate, you become an ambassador for the brand, you start really telling it, you become loyal, you buy more shoes, you tell your friends, you build on that. So you've got this sort of series of steps that we go through. And I think people are quite conscious and unconscious of it at different stages of where they are with brands. Buying, and a website needs to accommodate all those different steps, and service them equally is important, because your best customers are your existing customers. It's easier to keep an existing customer than get a new one, but if you're ignoring getting new ones, then you're not going to get a funnel at the beginning. So I don't know if that really explained it for the person.
No, I think it does beautifully. I mean, there's certainly from our experience of working with clients, when people come to us and existing clients, I think you're right, and there's a sort of a slightly better understanding of it than there used to be even a couple of years ago. And I think, the end result, like you said, being more sales is hard to argue with, really, when that's what we're trying to aim for. So in terms of simple, actionable things, if that's the logic behind it and what we're trying to do, what are the sort of steps that you would do? What are the kind of things you would do to a website?
Well, you need to sort of take a vertical slice of each of those stages of the journey and just make sure that you have an approach that deals with them. So, for example, at the discovery stage, you need to have a landing page that relates back to what they've typed in the search engine. Yeah. So that's where you guys are kind of experts at saying, look, people are searching for trail running shoes in January. You need to have a page that explains why you've got some trail running shoes that will solve that problem in January because they're waterproof, etc., etc. You then also need to think about the person who's coming back for the second time and going, right, I've discovered that, and now I want to discover a little bit more about, what sort of grip are these shoes going to do? Are they good for my left knee that's got a problem? All that sort of stuff, and allow them to build that section of the journey. Making the purchase as simple as possible is probably the critical one, sort of step 4. And then making sure that once they've signed up, or once they've bought the item, they get the follow-up email 3 months later. How are your shoes performing? Do you want to come back? Do you want to leave a review? Etc., etc. So not just seeing it as a single point of contact, just looking at going, are we addressing those customers at that point? Are we addressing them at this point? Etc., etc. Making sure they can easily come in to the right spot they need to come in at is the kind of keys. That comes through navigation, page layout, hierarchy of information, etc.
And I guess we kind of touched on this earlier on, but with your background in psychology, it is a very psychological part of building a website, running a business. Is there, when you are doing these things to people's websites, do you ever sort of channel that inner psychological side?
Yeah, possibly. I think there's one, when you go to university, there's a few things that always jump out at you that stay with you. And
Yeah.
it was quite a long time ago now for me. But there was this term, a design term called affordance. And it was an interesting concept that I learned about at psychology and with the human-computer interaction. It's the idea that a well-designed object affords something. So a chair affords the idea of sitting on it. A door handle affords the idea of turning it. Signs that we see throughout the streets and stuff have a certain affordance. We know what they are. They're recognizable signals. So when you're designing a system for a website, you want to know that that button affords clicking on. That button is going to open the size guide. It's good to challenge these things occasionally, but you kind of need to keep those basic principles. A green button is probably going to perform better than a red button for danger. Well, not for danger. The red button would be appropriate for danger. But yeah, so affordance is something I'm kind of a little bit passionate about. Not many people are aware of that term because it's so sort of natural that you sit into a chair, you fall into it, you know what to do with it. There's no question in your mind. And a good website will just ease those points through, I think.
That's a really interesting point there. And like you said, the relationship between what a door needs to do and what a button needs to do, fundamentally, they're kind of the same thing, really, when it comes to a website. Are there any things that you see in the day-to-day that are just common mistakes that most people, if they're putting together a website themselves, or maybe someone who's a bit less experienced, would look at and think that's fine, when really it is a bit of a blocker?
Yeah, I think it's usually at the touch points of interaction with the users trying to achieve a goal is where you get the most friction. They've found what they're trying to do and they click submit and they get very little feedback straight away. They're like, "Well, has it gone through or not?" We've done that classic thing. I get it on myself. I'm like, right, hit submit, put my credit card in. Am I getting the information back that's worked?
Yeah.
And it usually relies on one system talking to another system, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to give some sort of feedback immediately. Yeah, we've got it. We're working on it. Will flow through. And a good system like an aircraft website that's working well will have that really clear feedback, whereas other ones that are working badly, you're just left hanging, you don't know. Now that's hard for customers sometimes to really control because it's quite technical, but it's a really worthwhile investment of making sure that the error handling, the feedback mechanisms are really tight, and if you can get that in place, it works. And now we're lucky with like Shopify checkout, for example. It's all built into their system. They've really honed that process down really tight. So it takes a lot of that away from us having to worry about it. But I think that's feedback loops are critical, really.
So if that's baked into Shopify's standard at the moment, does that mean you don't need to do additional heat mapping, or are there other things that you deploy?
No, absolutely. So the bit I'm probably referring to then, Shopify, is the actual checkout process, the real business side of it, which is, from our side as an agency, is fantastic because that's taken away. And it's like, right, Shopify can do that and they do it really well. But getting to that point in the journey is, stage 3, stage 4. So we have to work, through, working with agencies like you to look at heat maps and saying, where are the bottlenecks? Why aren't people going from here to here to here? What can we possibly do? It can be as simple as moving a button further up the page. It can be as simple as changing the button from grey to green, because we pick up on those basic signals. I'm not saying all buttons should be green because that can look pretty awful sometimes, but you need to challenge these things.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I'm sure you've read all sorts of best practice and things over the years about what colours and what fonts and that kind of thing impact click-through. And I remember a while ago hearing that orange was the best colour, but obviously, if a company's worked really hard on their brand guidelines, their colours, that sort of thing, a bright orange button, it might stick out, but for the wrong reasons. So from your point of view, if you've got a really tight set of tone of voice guidelines or design guidelines to work within, how easy or difficult is it to still make things stand out in that kind of way?
Yeah, and that's a very good question, because something that we always put a lot of emphasis on is the brand guidelines, is the essence of the conversation the website's having with you back. And you've got to keep a consistent tone of voice. Whilst you want to direct someone along, you don't want to be too forceful. You want to give them control. You want them to feel like they are making the choices rather than the website is for you. So being aware of brand, being aware of font, being aware of color is important. But I saw an instance yesterday shared on a Slack group where someone showed a red button as it was like, the message was like, yes, please proceed. And the button was bright red. And every sort of signal is going in your brain going, I shouldn't be pressing that button. And that's just a blocker. And if you were to look at the statistics of where people fall out, that would probably be a big thing. They're like, well, I wasn't sure I should press the big red button. So I went to a talk once where there was a guy from PayPal doing an interesting discussion. He said, here's my one takeaway from this evening. If you put a padlock symbol next to your checkout button on the same button, so it's like implies secure, you get a 5% uplift. And we're just like, oh, have that one for free. So we pretty much, if you look at any of our websites, you'll see a little padlock beside them because it's just a reassurance thing. So
how interesting. Yeah. I mean, I can certainly see how that has come into the collective consciousness, like with HTTPS as well. You get that little padlock on the checkout screens and on certain web pages. So it's interesting how that, it's almost the opposite to the red meaning danger thing, which is so ingrained to us long before computers. That's just animals see red in the wild and don't go there, but that still factors into it. But padlocks obviously being a much more modern interpretation of that. So that is really interesting, and like you said, creating a bit of a feedback loop there. If people see it means something, then if they see it more often, then it does just encourage that. I mean, presumably it's not more secure than one without a picture.
No, probably not. It really isn't. It just comes back to that psychology of just giving them the right signals at the right time. And the other thing is just, keeping the principles that you see elsewhere consistent. And, we have a sort of approach in our studio where it's like, we're always trying to change things a little bit, but don't just change things without understanding why. Yeah. It's just like, don't say, I've decided to move that button over there for that reason, because it just needs to be qualified. And there are design patterns about how to move through a website, and if you start really mixing up with that, people just get confused, and the net result, it's not positive. But we also work closely with agencies again like you and stuff, and other partners who do a lot of conversion rate optimization, where we can measure changing a button from one side to the other, the impact. And what we do with Finisterre, for example, every single change is completely measured. We won't move anything unless we've got a positive affirmation that's a good thing. And there's so many opportunities to put systems in place that will check your performance rather than just doing it willy-nilly.
Yeah.
So
would you say that's been the biggest change to sort of conversion rate optimization UX journey in the last few years? Because I guess fundamentally, in however long it's actually been an industry, the goal has been the same, to make it easier for users. So, I mean, from the SEO industry, we kind of have to move with what Google is saying. So if they change their algorithms to say one day this was a ranking factor, now the opposite is true. If you have this, it works against you. I guess that's less the case within your line of work.
Yeah, because the fundamental principles generally remain, but they're all constantly being pushed with new devices. And I mean, I think it's going to be fascinating what virtual reality is going to do to this whole sphere in the next 5-10 years.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Why virtual reality in particular, do you think?
Well, as low as I am to say it, with Mr. Zuckerberg behind the plans, something is coming big. I think it was during lockdown, just impulse buy, because all the signals were being pushed there. My customer journey, I bought one of those Oculus Quest headsets.
Yeah.
Have you tried one?
I tried, well, my experience of VR, I feel, isn't representative of modern VR. I'm told they're a lot better than they were 10 years ago. My overwhelming sensation was nausea and immediately wanting to chuck up. So, but I'm told they're better now.
Maybe they're better because that happens more because it's so real. I mean, one of the first things I put on was a roller coaster, because you're like, I'll push the big roller coaster button and see what happens.
Yeah.
I was standing up in my office and I literally fell over backwards. And it's a funny tool. I mean, I just play around with it. We haven't done anything seriously professional with it, but it is a mind-blowing experience. And I think I've done that classic thing of like, I'll go and buy a bit of land in the virtual reality.
Yeah.
I missed that boat by about 3 years. And also by about 50 million quid, I discovered, because I had a look. I was like, I'll buy that spot there. How much is it going to be? But anyway, going off in a tangent. But I think that's an area that I think is going to be quite fascinating. But it's very advanced sort of stuff. I can't remember how we got to this point. But VR is a very interesting area, I think. And I think we'll be shopping through headsets soon.
Interesting.
But I think the biggest barrier to it, like any new tech, is the hardware.
Yeah.
Clunky and horrible. But
So, from your point of view, there, Jonathan, VR is an interesting one because I think for the marketing side of it, there's always, whenever this new technology comes along, what can we do with it really? And I think that the biggest one for us in the last few years has been, as we see more and more people moving over to mobile from desktop. I mean, what is different from the mobile version of a site compared to a desktop when you're optimizing? Because a lot of people do it sideways, there are going to be different dimensions at play. How easy is it for you to design a website that works for both?
yeah, that's a good question. The fact you said sideways there threw me, because any agency likes to have their phone upright, and turning it sideways, it's a very challenging thing to design as well. So that's a really good point, because
I might be an anomaly in using my phone sideways these days. I've been told both I'm young and hip and old for doing it, so I don't know.
it's a very valid point, and that demonstrates a challenge we have and the responsibility we have as a web agency, is that we have to handle so many different varieties of technology and devices to do it. And mobile phone is what we're seeing everyone's first point of contact with a brand usually. So we've taken a mobile first approach to design for the last sort of 5 years. Just looking at, how does this first appear on my phone when I first see it? And then building the design outwards to handle laptops, tablets, and desktops. And it's all about understanding two things really: where the person is when they're interacting with the website, and is the website going to be more relevant to them on the move, or is it going to be more relevant to them at home? So when you're dealing with a bit of tech, like I'm trying to find your office, the website just needs to be straight to the point, etc., etc. And I want to just get on my phone and find it. I'm very unlikely to find this, look for the same thing on my laptop necessarily. I might do a bit of pre-advanced things. So looking at different stages of when you're using the device. And it comes back to, looking at an e-commerce website. Where is that person likely to be using this? A lot of browsing in front of the telly, it's still on your phone. And that will come through, like someone sends you an Instagram link, you click on it, you go to the brand, you come to the website, you pick it up and you see it. So it's getting the key messages across much quicker and simpler. What are people looking for on a phone is usually quite, I want the answer pretty quick.
Yeah.
Stuff. So what we sort of find, my personal experience as well, is that you get the sort of two ends of the customer journey very much mobile centric. That first point of contact, be it through a social share, be it casually out trying to find something quickly on your phone. Then personally, it depends on what I'm trying to, what the object is, if you use the term object. So if it's like buying a jacket for £200, for argument's sake, I'm likely personally to then go and say, right, I found a jacket I really like. I will then maybe do a bit of the discovery phase on a slightly easier laptop, having a coffee, explore it, read about the seams, read about the manufacturing process, etc. A little bit more information, which maybe on the phone might be a little bit tucked away, which quite rightly so. And then if I'm confident with the brand I bought with them before, I'm happy to then purchase either on my laptop or on my phone. But I think you have to sort of see the website evolve from one to the other and back again. Also depends on the price point. If I'm buying a t-shirt for 20 quid, I'm probably quite happy to do it on my phone. Just go bang, bang, bang. If I'm come at the jacket, less so. But if I'm buying my third jacket from that brand, I probably would be happy. So coming back to the journeys, coming back to the experience, I think you have to see it as a sort of evolutionary flow. Quite a long answer to your question.
It's a great answer to the question. I mean, I potentially oversimplified in my mind. I think for me, whether I make a search on a phone or a computer is based on how long the term is that I'm going to have to search, and whether I can be bothered with my thumbs to try and approximate a sentence compared to just tapping it out on the keyboard. Would you say that Shopify is a particularly easy medium to work in then for everything that you have to do?
Yeah, I think just coming back a step actually earlier as well to what you talked about, sort of talking about new tech and stuff as well, is that often I think it's overlooked on a phone is the ability to speak to it. We browse websites quite happily and it's just sort of drawing information, but we don't use a device for voice very often. Siri's obviously changed that quite a lot, but recently, again, coming back to the Finisterre website, their search at the top, we've got the ability to now hit the microphone, speak for your search, and get the search results based on voice.
Interesting.
I think voice is an undervalued area of mobile technology at the minute, which is ironic because it's all originally about speaking into it.
Yeah.
So I think that will grow. Shopify as a facilitator for mobile, obviously the checkout, as I said, on their system is very, very mobile first. It's got lovely integration with like Apple Pay, Google Pay, so you can just click away. Prior steps to that in the user journey about the website is really down to how it's designed and built. So regardless if it's on Shopify, WordPress, etc., you got to follow the right principles.
Yeah, it's funny mentioning the checkout process on Shopify. When we do conversion rate optimization UX services for our clients, if ever there is something that if we're seeing traffic to the site but not sales as a result, that kind of thing, we always know if it's a Shopify site that it's not going to be a problem with the checkout, because if they are getting there, then they're guaranteed. I mean, it is possibly the best one of all of the website builders out there that is just baked into it. So I'm glad that you guys have the same approach to that, because that validates a lot of our thinking as well.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons we shifted to e-commerce back in 2017 was because prior to that, we were getting we had a few e-commerce websites, but they sort of made me shudder a little bit, because you get a text message from the client over the weekend saying something's wrong with the website, so-and-so's card, so-and-so's payment hasn't gone through, and then you put down your Sunday lunch and try and help them out, and discover after about half an hour of digging around, it's just because their card has expired.
Yeah.
And I was like, we can't sustain this. This is ridiculous, because the person can't buy anything because they've got no money in the bank account. And then when we shifted to the Shopify model, we knew that was all taken care of, because the feedback loops were great, and we could just say to the client.
Sadly, we still can't optimize humans for the websites.
No, that's true, but it will happen.
So for people who maybe have their own e-commerce website and run their own e-commerce shop, which we've seen quite a rise in since the pandemic in particular, when a lot of people went online. For anyone that isn't sure what to look out for, to the telltale signs that they will actually need to have their site optimized for conversion rate and UX, what kind of things might they be looking for?
I keep sort of abstracting upwards a little bit broader. I think the three central sort of tenets of any successful website, e-commerce business, etc., for me come down to not so much technology, but typography, good typeface, so good font, really legible, lovely branded font. That's a really good investment. Photography, fantastic. We're really lucky. A lot of our clients have invested in photography. And then also, content. If you've got those three pieces in place, you are 90% of the way of pushing someone to a checkout than any other system you've got. If you're trying to sell the world's greatest pair of trainers, but you haven't got the photography to support it, your typeface just looks really awkward, you're not going to even get to the technical point where they start buying it. So we always say, look, just come to us with those three ingredients and we can make something really good happen for you. And we can put the UX in place that we know is going to help convert that. But so any small business is looking at that, I'd say, before you speak to a web agency, before you speak to anyone, just put a bit of budget aside to make sure your product looks amazing on the photos. Because however much money you throw at something, if the photos looks awful, you're not going to sell it, especially online. And also it helps minimize returns, the dreaded returns of e-commerce. I think the industry average in the UK of returns is around 30 to 40%. And that's because the website picture doesn't necessarily reflect what it is. On a tangent here, my teenage son, bought some jeans yesterday online. Turned up not quite the right shade of blue. Absolute teenage mayhem. And I was just like, you can send them back. But his argument was, well, they didn't look that color online. Yeah. So now, we're going to send those shoes, not the shoes, those trousers back. We're going to be out of pocket. The business is probably going to be out of pocket. No one wins. If that photo had been taken better in the first place,
It's anecdotal, but it's such a fair point. I mean, even myself, I can think of things I've bought online and thought they would have sold this a long time ago if they had better photos of the product. And it's only because you are taking a bit of a leap sometimes that it's what you think it is compared to what they've given you photo evidence of.
I bought a few things online. They turn up, there was some sort of wall magnets we needed in the office. I'll come with that later, but they turned up and they were like absolutely a couple of millimeters across because they hadn't put any scale measure. I was expecting these big magnets to turn up so we could stick things on our whiteboard. And it was just like, oh, really?
I guess that's the downside of using a light tent to take photos of things. It's very difficult to get scale in there. And we have in our house, not my partner's proudest thing, but certainly my favourite thing in the house is a baking tray, which is approximately this long, which we did not expect to be that small when we bought it.
I think everyone has those things.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. But I think, so yeah, we say to our clients, if you come to us with those 3 ingredients, we can sort of bake you the most perfect cake you kind of want in terms of a website. And we're very fortunate that a lot of clients have invested in that. Our responsibility then is to make those products shine online and get a good, hierarchy of typography, a hierarchy of how to move forward through the website, hierarchy of displaying information that's relevant, care, specifications, returns policy, all that stuff. So.
Right, Jonathan, we've got some quick fire questions for you. First, what is your industry hot take? Any controversial opinions you might have?
Controversial opinions. I'm not a fan of the cookie banner.
Nobody is.
And I just think it's a completely pointless bit of tech.
Yeah.
And we're all succumbing to it. And hopefully someday someone will go, let's get rid of this. It is dreadful because it's doing no purpose.
I think that would be very popular if someone could replace that anytime soon.
Get rid of that.
Are there any limitations of Shopify that you see on other site builders that you perhaps see with envy?
Yeah, absolutely. The URL structures sometimes with Shopify are very constraining, so you're forced down certain routes, like you have to put /pages or / collections. From an SEO perspective, it's not great. That's something I really would like to see changed. They're loosening up ironically, the bit I've been talking about, the checkout. You can make that much more flexible, which is going to be great. But the great thing with Shopify is that what I don't like this week, in 6 months' time, they actually do generally change it, so... hopefully.
Excellent. I'm glad it's not just us that gets annoyed by the pagination there.
No, all that stuff is dreadful.
Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really interesting from my point of view, and we'd be thrilled to have you back at some point if you would care to join us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you again, Jonathan.
Cheers.
3, 2, 1, yeah!